German pilots laughed at U.S. planes until the Thunderbolt turned the skies into hell.
April 8th, 1943. 27,000 feet above Caen, France. The sky was a pale, icy blue, and the air so thin it burned the lungs even behind oxygen masks. Oberleutnant Ralph Hermachin, a seasoned veteran of Jagdgeschwader 26, adjusted the straps of his flight harness and scanned the horizon. Below him, the patchwork fields of Normandy stretched like a green and brown chessboard, quiet and peaceful, a stark contrast to the violence about to unfold. Ahead, the silhouettes of American P-47 Thunderbolts struggled to gain altitude, their bulky fuselages awkward against the elegant sweep of the FW-190. Hermachin's lips curled into a smirk beneath his oxygen mask. The Thunderbolts looked almost comical to him, slow, ungainly, and lacking the nimble grace of German fighters. "Flying milk bottles," he muttered under his breath. He signaled his wingman, and the FW-190s surged forward, slicing through the thin air with practiced precision. To Hermachin and the other Luftwaffe veterans, the Americans were predictable, their tactics naive. He chuckled, confident the next engagement would be another demonstration of German aerial superiority. But Hermachin's confidence was misplaced. The Americans in these lumbering machines were about to redefine air combat entirely. Powered by the formidable Pratt Whitney R-2800 double Wasp engine and armed with 8.50 caliber Browning machine guns, the P-47 Thunderbolt was no ordinary fighter. It was a flying fortress, designed not for turning duels or climbing contests, but for high-speed diving attacks, devastating firepower, and unmatched durability. Every American pilot flying the Thunderbolt understood a simple rule: avoid prolonged dogfights, exploit speed, mass, and firepower, and survive where others would perish. Major Donald Billy, commanding the 335th Fighter Squadron, was among the first to understand the aircraft's true potential. Unlike the Luftwaffe pilots trained in traditional maneuvers, Billy emphasized boom and zoom tactics: climb high, dive with full throttle, unleash concentrated bursts of machine gun fire, and use the aircraft's mass and momentum to disengage. The Thunderbolt was industrial might incarnate, a plane built to survive punishment that would destroy any other fighter. In the hands of disciplined and well-trained pilots, it was a lethal predator. Initial encounters over France seemed to confirm German assumptions. The Thunderbolts were cumbersome in tight turns and slow to climb, especially compared to the FW-19s and BF-19s. Yet what stunned both sides was the aircraft's survivability. A P-47 could take hits that would have shredded almost any other fighter, yet pilots returned largely unscathed. The legend of Lieutenant Johnson's P-47, which limped back from a mission on May 4th, 1943, with over 212 bullet holes, spread quickly. German pilots began to understand the terrifying resilience of these machines. They were not only durable, they were nearly unstoppable when flown correctly. By mid-1943, American pilots had learned to master the Thunderbolt's strengths. They routinely climbed to altitudes above 30,000 feet, beyond the effective reach of most German fighters, then plunged in steep dives, using gravity to build incredible speed. At 450 to 500 miles per hour, they would flatten into enemy formations, unleash a concentrated wall of lead, and climb back to safety. These attacks were sudden, brutal, and often devastatingly effective. The P-47 had become a nightmare from the skies, earning the nickname Flying Tank, not just for its armor, but for its ability to deliver annihilation and survive unscathed. The spring of 1944 saw the Thunderbolt emerge as the backbone of the Allied air effort. P-47s escorted heavily laden B-17 and B-24s deep into the heart of Germany, fending off Luftwaffe attacks with overwhelming firepower. Beyond escort duty, the Thunderbolts struck fear into German forces on the ground, strafing trains, armored columns, airfields, and supply depots. They were no longer just fighters. They were instruments of total aerial dominance. Even the introduction of revolutionary jet fighters like the Me-262 did not render them obsolete. Pilots such as John C. Meare and George Bostwick intercepted jets, demonstrating that a propeller-driven aircraft with superior dive speed, armor, and armament could still dictate the terms of engagement. The P-47's success was as much a product of American industrial might as pilot skill. Over 15,000 Thunderbolts were produced, each built with precision and reliability, while pilot training programs rapidly churned out skilled aviators, keeping losses sustainable. The Luftwaffe, increasingly crippled by shortages and attrition, could not replace pilots or machines quickly enough to challenge this relentless force. By 1945, the combination of durability, firepower, tactical innovation, and sheer production capacity had effectively neutralized Germany's ability to contest the skies. Stories from the pilots themselves reveal just how extraordinary the aircraft was. Lieutenant Frank Bostwick recounted strafing a German airfield in France, returning with his canopy riddled with flak and bullet holes, the engine smoking. Yet the P-47 had brought him home safely. Major Billy himself survived an engagement where 3 FW-190s had fired simultaneously, only to see the Thunderbolt's thick armor and self-sealing fuel tanks absorb the damage. These accounts became legendary, inspiring a generation of pilots who knew that in the P-47, survival was not just luck, it was engineering. What began as a seemingly awkward, laughable aircraft had, by the end of the war, become a symbol of raw, unrelenting American power. The P-47 Thunderbolt entered combat as a joke and ended the war as a tool of annihilation, a testament to American ingenuity, tactical brilliance, and the terrifying efficiency of combining durability with overwhelming firepower. For the Luftwaffe, it was a bitter lesson. Experience and skill could be outmatched by machines designed not just to fly, but to endure, strike, and survive. In the calculus of war, the P-47 proved that the combination of industrial might, tactical innovation, and superior engineering could decisively shape the skies. By the time the smoke of war cleared over Europe, the Thunderbolt's legacy was undeniable. It had escorted thousands of bombers, decimated enemy infrastructure, and forced the Luftwaffe into retreat. Pilots on both sides came to respect the machine. For the Germans, it was a relentless adversary. For the Americans, a trusted companion in the skies. Hermichin, who had once laughed at the milk bottles, would later recall with grim humility that these aircraft had changed the rules of aerial warfare forever. The story of the P-47 Thunderbolt is not just the story of a plane, but the story of how innovation, strategy, and sheer industrial capacity can reshape the very nature of warfare. What began as an aircraft dismissed by its enemies as clumsy and awkward became, through ingenuity and relentless development, one of the most formidable weapons in the Allied arsenal. Its success lay not merely in its technical specifications, the massive R2800 engine, the 8.50 caliber machine guns, or its nearly indestructible airframe, but in the philosophy of its use. The Thunderbolt was a manifestation of a new way of thinking about air combat. It leveraged brute force, protection, and momentum over finesse, proving that victory in the skies required more than piloting skill alone. It required a complete understanding of the strengths of both men and machines. The P-47's impact was multidimensional. In the air, it redefined tactics, forcing a shift from classic turning dogfights to the boom and zoom approach, prioritizing altitude, speed, and concentrated firepower. On the ground, it became a terror, striking railways, convoys, and airfields with impunity, demonstrating that air superiority could directly shape the battlefield. Its presence demanded a strategic response, and even the Luftwaffe's best pilots found themselves challenged in ways they had never anticipated. Each encounter, each mission, revealed the terrifying combination of resilience and lethality that made the Thunderbolt almost unstoppable. Equally important was the industrial and logistical framework that supported the aircraft. Over 15,000 P-47s were produced, each one a meticulously engineered tool of war, supported by a vast network of training, maintenance, and supply. Where German forces struggled to replace pilots or machines, the Allies could rapidly replenish losses and sustain a high operational tempo. In this way, the Thunderbolt was as much a weapon of economic and logistical power as it was of aerial combat. It exemplified how strategy, production, and innovation could converge to produce overwhelming force, and in doing so, it rendered even highly skilled adversaries increasingly vulnerable. For the men who flew them, the Thunderbolt was both protector and partner. Pilots trusted it to survive what would have been fatal encounters in lesser aircraft. They relied on it to carry them into combat and bring them home, often battered but intact. This bond between man and machine became a central element of its success, illustrating that technology alone could not win wars, but technology combined with training, discipline, and courage could. By war's end, the P-47 had achieved something rare in military history. It transformed perceptions, tactics, and outcomes. It turned the skies over Europe into a domain dominated by American power, reshaped Luftwaffe strategies, and underscored a fundamental truth of modern warfare. Mastery of the battlefield comes not only from skill, courage, or even innovation alone, but from the seamless integration of all three. Where Oberleutnant Hermichin had once laughed at the milk bottles, by 1945 there was no laughter, only respect, fear, and the grudging acknowledgement that the P-47 Thunderbolt had, in every sense, rewritten the rules of air combat. Ultimately, the Thunderbolt's legacy endures as a testament to human ingenuity and industrial might. It proved that an aircraft, even one initially underestimated, could redefine an entire theater of war when paired with strategy, skill, and relentless determination. It was not just a machine. It was a turning point, a symbol of resilience, and a reminder that the combination of preparation, innovation, and courage can turn even the most unlikely tool into an instrument of triumph. For generations of pilots, historians, and enthusiasts, the P-47 remains a shining example of how technology and human will can converge to achieve something extraordinary. A flying tank that carried the weight of victory on its wings.